We awakened this morning to a lot of newspaper coverage of the Hugh Edwards case. Who knew about Hugh is what it says on the front page of the Daily Mail. Guilty on the front page of The Sun. Hugh Edwards' downfall. The trusted face of the BBC, first exposed by The Sun, admits having a pedo video of a boy as young as 7. And on the front page of The Times, Edwards pleads guilty to viewing indecent images. One of the things, one of the pictures, I suppose, that will remain with us for a long time is Hugh Edwards walking into the court, actually policed by a phalanx of police officers, seemingly protected, like personal protection officers, walking with him as he walked through the sort of assembled paparazzi photographers and journalists outside. Quite an extraordinary scene. He seemed to have 5 or 6 police officers walking down the street with him. I don't think I've ever seen anything like that. I don't know how the police could even actually grant permission for that kind of private protection for an individual who has been charged with such serious offences. He pleaded guilty, of course, yesterday. We're going to speak now to John Mayer, ex-BBC producer and author of several books about the BBC, a man that knows the BBC very well inside and out. John, very good morning to you. Before I come to you, let me just read you this from the BBC's own statement yesterday. In November 2023, whilst Mr Edwards was suspended, the BBC, as his employer at the time, was made aware in confidence that he had been arrested on suspicion of serious offences and released on bail whilst the police continued their investigation. At the time, no charges had been brought against Mr Edwards, and the BBC had also been made aware of significant risk to his health. I mean, I've got some questions, and Talker's got some questions as well, which I'm going to ask you, John, not because you're in any way responsible for this, but just because I'd be interested to know what you can tell us about the processes at the BBC.
Mike, look, usually I defend the BBC, but not on this occasion. You know, this is the worst crisis I can remember in 45 years of working for, writing and talking about the BBC.
Yeah.
Normally these rows are confected by people like you in the right-wing press, but this is actually a row which is made by the BBC. It's totally self-inflicted. You know, I actually think Director General Tim Davies should clear up a lot of staff from the Commissioner at BBC Wales who didn't take the family seriously, all the way through to the editorial staff, all the way through to the HR staff, the legal staff, who've given him naff advice.
Yes.
Absolute naff advice.
Do you think as well that Tim Davie has his job on the line here, because he's been called in to see Lisa Nandy, Culture Secretary, this morning. She wants to know why a whole series of questions need to be answered and what he's going to say to her about this. But, I mean, let's face it, Tim Davies had a pretty rocky ride over the course of time, and it hasn't all been because stories have been confected about the BBC. It's because of the BBC's own ineptitude and the BBC's own inability to control some of its own staff.
Absolutely, man. Now look, any sensible Director General employs flack catchers, employs a senior journalist or somebody like that as a Deputy Director General who catches the flack. Tim hasn't done that. He's employed management consultants, HR people who surround him. You know, he's got nobody around him who says, look, Tim, hang on a minute, this is serious. We need to be transparent and open about this. Which, you know, they still aren't being transparent and open about the Hugh Edwards situation. Where are the reports? Why are they published? Why did they pay him for half a year? Why didn't they just establish an escrow account and put the money into that and say, look, Hugh, if you're found guilty, we'll keep the money. If not, you know, you pay it back. You know, it's absolutely.
Right. People are staggered that he was able to continue to be paid all that money. But let me put a couple of questions to you, because we've got some questions and we are going to put these to the BBC. One, the first question: who at the BBC knew or was made aware that Hugh Edwards had been arrested in November? Because the BBC statement says that they were made aware, but exactly who was made aware?
I would have thought it's compliance and editorial policy, and it's their job to tell the Director General. This is a massively serious event. Somebody should have gone to Tim and said, Tim, look, you know, the police have told, and what else they should have done is kept in touch with the police.
Yes, but when the BBC says that they were made aware in confidence that he had been arrested, does that not suggest to you that that was a very high-level conversation that would have taken place possibly between the head of the Metropolitan Police and Tim Davie?
It does, and you know, what does in confidence mean when your senior news presenter is actually being arrested and interviewed for a very, very serious charge?
Right.
Actually, that means nothing. The BBC should have just broken that confidence, should have actually got Hugh Edwards in and said, what's all this? And at that point, I suspended him or sacked him.
Yeah. Now, number 2 question, did those individuals, whoever they are, raise this with the Editorial Guidelines and Standards Committee within the BBC, which they should have done, right?
Probably, but, that's like talking to Blancmange, talking to that lot. Seriously, the BBC has lots and lots of people whose job it is to not do anything, so they will have talked and talked and talked. What was actually needed was action, and that action meant not paying him, meant interviewing him and find, well, what's the truth about this? The BBC goes on about Hugh Edwards' mental health. What about the kids? What about the licence pay in this case?
Well, exactly right. Question number 3, did the Editorial Guidelines and Standards Committee, although, as you say, not worth the paper they're written on, discuss Hugh Edwards' arrest for serious offences? Surely they must have done.
I don't know. Do they publish their minutes? If they don't, they should. I mean, the BBC board should meet urgently today and say, look, these are the documents. Let's have them out in the open. And by the way, you better resign today or by the end of the week.
Yeah. I mean, it's definitely a question of who knew what, when did they know it, and who did they tell, isn't it?
Indeed, and if they knew in November, then they're complicit in it, and the people who knew should actually fall on their sword today.
Yes, I think that's absolutely right. I mean, one of the other things that I've been obviously doing is talking to quite a few people who know people inside of the BBC, and I'm told that there were conversations that were had between the BBC at, again, a pretty high level, and Hugh Edwards' wife, so that, he could be protected.
Well, of course he needed to be protected. Of course his mental health, but also, the BBC is much bigger than Hugh Edwards, and they should protect their reputation, and they haven't done that. This is reputationally really very, very damaging, and it's amazing that all the management consultants and so on around the DG haven't spotted it. What are they doing? Asleep on the job?
Yeah,
resign today.
And he also, I mean, let's not forget, he got a £40,000 pay rise last year, even though he was suspended.
Highest paid news presenter, has been for years and years and years. Come on, this is so silly. They should, as I say, put it in an account, an escrow account, and say, look, Hugh, if you're found guilty, this money is not yours. If you're found innocent, the money is yours.
Yeah.
But not carry on paying. Everybody who's involved in this is sullied, and quite a lot of them need to actually look at their conscience and look in the mirror and say, why am I doing this job? Should I be doing it tomorrow?
And what do you make of, and this is not really BBC related, but what do you make of the CPS kind of keeping this almost secret? Sharing information with the police and presumably with the BBC, but not making it public, which in most cases it would have been. And also, how on earth does he get those police officers to be his kind of private security on the way into court?
I don't know. He's obviously got friends in the Metropolitan Police, but I mean, the CPS was wrong, absolutely wrong. And if somebody is charged or somebody's arrested, they have to make it public. There's no ifs or buts. It doesn't matter how famous they are or infamous. They have to make it public. And they would. When newspapers rang them up, they said, "Oh no progress on this." Actually,
right.
There's a lot of rotten apples in this case, and quite a lot of them need to be pulled out and thrown away.
Right. And if you remember all the way back to the first page 1 that the Sun actually did, which is all the way back in July of 2023, the BBC kind of encouraged what you might call shall we say, cognitive dissonance about the Sun. Well, it's the Sun, so obviously why would anybody believe a word of it, And it was almost as though people like John Sopel and Emily Maitlis wanted to come out and say, oh, the Sun's dreadful. The Sun, peering into people's private lives. They shouldn't be able to do it. Top BBC star in Sex Pics Probes. That was before he was named, because, of course, it was his own wife that came out and named him.
It was, but look, I mean, let's be honest. The Sun didn't have that much evidence when they printed. Either the lawyers wouldn't let them, or didn't have much evidence.
Oh, I think the Sun had lots of evidence. I think the Sun actually was incredibly responsible in the way that it reported this, because I think at the time when the name was not revealed, the Sun would have known an awful lot more than they were putting in the paper.
Yeah, I know, but look, the BBC always reacts badly in these situations. It needs to look itself in the face and say, look, we need to be on the front foot in these situations, not be reacting to everything. And certainly whoever's giving Tim Davie advice needs to be on their bike.
Yes. Well, I think finally, John, you and I can agree on something. I mean, we did it just the other day, actually. So I think it's the beginning of a beautiful friendship. I can't imagine where we go from here.
I look forward to buying you another meal at the Groucho, Mike.
OK, John, thank you very much indeed. John Mayer, ex-BBC producer, author of several books.